What up, Coordination? On the pod today, we have Mike Sall and Blake West, who are the co-founders of Goldfinch. Goldfinch is a protocol that enables people to access capital. Their target is basically delivering USDC financing to over 2 million people and businesses across 20 countries where financing can be difficult or expensive to access in the old financial system. So using crypto rails to provide access and financial inclusion to the people who have been gated from that access in the old system. So I think that is an important pillar of the regenerative crypto economic system because it access to liquidity and growth capital in a lot of these markets is hard to come by. And if crypto can provide that, then that's good for those communities. But I also think that it kind of legitimizes crypto in a way because if for listeners who are around during DeFi summer, you just kind of had these self-referential yields. You had these vegetable forks that would give you veggie coin forks like Yam Finance and all of their forks that would just give you yields based off of the creation of new tokens that's really had no value other than mimetic value. And with Goldfinch, you're earning real yields that are based on real businesses and their returns and their growth. And so peer-to-peer finance, we're cutting out Wall Street, cutting out the middleman and using a protocol way of financing businesses. I think it's cool because I think it disrupts the old financial system. It legitimizes crypto and it provides capital to small businesses that are growing, which feels kind of regen. So yeah, Goldfinch is a pretty interesting product and really happy to have them on the GreenPilled pod. Without further ado, I give you Mike Sall and Blake West of Goldfinch. Enjoy, Coordination.
HAIRDAO is here to route around the middlemen in biomedical research for hair loss. HAIRDAO is an open source investment and operating organization using the coordination tools of Ethereum to begin exploring the frontier of biomedical research that bureaucracy and middlemen have previously prevented. Did you know that 66% of men and 50% of women will experience hair loss in their lifetimes? HAIRDAO has already done some crazy cool science stuff, like their first research study on the impact of synthetic T3 and T4 thyroid hormones on the human scalp, and is also the second DAO ever to mint an IP NFT. So if you want to explore the frontier of the decentralized science movement, and maybe also you've lost your hair along the way, check out HAIRDAO at hairdao.xyz.
What's up, Mike? What's up, Blake? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, nice to be here.
So what's Goldfinch and what are y'all doing within the regenerative crypto space?
So Goldfinch is a credit protocol, and the underlying kind of concept behind it was just seeing a lot of activity in crypto and seeing how a lot of what was happening was kind of self-referential, doing other kind of crypto things, but believing that there's really an opportunity for DeFi and crypto to have more of an impact around the world and really expand access to capital. And the real key to doing that is getting the broader actual global kind of economy into the DeFi space so it can benefit from all that interoperability and efficiency. And so at a high level, Goldfinch is building that bridge between all of the crypto activity with the broader economy. And we've focused first on emerging market lending businesses and fintechs by providing capital to them and enabling them to borrow capital where they haven't previously been as well served. And so that's a high level of what Goldfinch is. And now Goldfinch has extended loans out to businesses in over 20 countries, and over 2 million people and businesses have now been reached by the capital with over $100 million in loans. And so that is, already, a big part of what Goldfinch is doing. I don't know if anything to add to that.
Pretty solid intro. We can dive into as much as you want, though, Kev.
Great. I'm wondering, so a question I get a lot from starting Gitcoin and that I sort of sharpened over time was why crypto? Why do this on crypto rails? Couldn't you just do this on the old banking system? Wouldn't that be easier? Was a question that I got. And so I'm wondering what crypto and Web3 enables Goldfinch to do that the old financial system didn't enable you to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We also get that question a lot. And, an analogy that we think about here is like, we actually kind of think about it. So when you put cash flows on chain, we kind of think of this analogy where it's similar to what the move was from documents being in hard drives to documents being in the cloud, right? So like before, documents were still digital. They existed on people's hard drives. But if you wanted to move them around, if you wanted to edit them, you wanted to give people updates and stuff, it was difficult to do that, right? Some people were, might be physically sending CDs in the mail, they'd be sending hard disks around and reprinting stuff out and letting people know. It was all just kind of annoying, even though it was still using computers. But the cloud really opened this up. It allowed for public accessibility, allowed for editability, allowed for changes to be instantly seen by everyone, and it allowed for a lot of also like composability. You can now integrate these things with apps that didn't talk to each other before. And we think a similar thing kind of happens with cash flows on chain when you move them to crypto, right? So today we think of these cash flows, if you're talking about a loan, they kind of live in this silo of like a bank, right? And it's difficult for other people to get access to that. If you want to move that cash flow around, it takes legal structures and documents, and it's kind of a hassle. It's usually pretty expensive, and people only do those kinds of things of like moving cash flows around and tranching them up at scale. But we think crypto, again, offers this way that it's almost like moving into the cloud, and now it becomes trivially easy to move cash flows around by just like sending a token. And you also have this incredible composability that these tokens can be used with other applications that people are building. And you can, tranche it, slice it, dice it, do whatever you want. You have all this flexibility that programming gives you with those cash flows. And so we think that opens up a lot of things, like specifically around more liquidity, more accessibility, and more composability. And we can talk about sort of examples of how we think we're already seeing that with Goldfinch today, but that's the high level of what we think crypto really does.
Amazing. And I'd love to, I think the question so far has been like, what is Goldfinch and how does it help people? But I'd love to go from having an inside out perspective to having more of an outside in perspective. Can you tell us about some of the people that have gotten capital from Goldfinch and how that has helped them improve their businesses or improve the community around them? What is sort of your target customer, and working backwards from them, what kind of activity have you seen on the network?
Yeah, so when I described before of how Goldfinch is providing capital to fintech and lending businesses, they are predominantly in emerging markets, but also 20% of the capital is in the US, so it's really globally. And what these businesses do is they have expertise in the local markets for lending to businesses or consumers, and they use technology or some kind of local advantage that allows them to do that. And what Goldfinch is doing is essentially providing warehouse capital, giving them capital to expand their businesses. And I can share a couple examples. So one is a company called Tigende. They operate in Uganda and Kenya. And what they do is they provide motorcycle taxi loans. So people who do kind of like the Uber of Kenya by giving people rides on a motorcycle, they get a motorcycle. It's $2,000, and it's like a rent-to-own model where they pay it back over the course of 2 years. And Tigende provides these to, they call them micro entrepreneurs. They have over 50,000 of these customers who are doing this. And it's a really great business model because if someone isn't paying back their loan, Tigende has a GPS unit on the actual motorcycle, so they can go and reclaim the motorcycle. And so it's just a very profitable business, but it's also giving all of these people the opportunity to really earn a living and build their own sort of business by doing motorcycle taxi rides. So that's one example. And so they have borrowed $5 million through Goldfinch. And so now basically crypto is helping to fund this activity in Kenya and allowing Tigende to expand their operations there by literally buying motorcycles to lend out to more folks. Another example is a company called Greenway. And what they do is they have a cook stove that's a clean cook stove that doesn't use, doesn't use fires. And so it's much more economically eco-friendly to do that. And so then they do a similar thing where they lend these cook stoves out to low-income households throughout both Africa and also primarily in India. And that allows people to get the cook stove and then also do it in an eco-friendly manner. And so they also borrowed $750K through the protocol, going through one of the channel partners we have called Almavest, which is a credit fund. And so, yeah, those are a couple of examples of how Goldfinch is enabling the capital in crypto to really get into the hands of folks who are putting into great productive uses in the world.
And it might also be worth adding some color around sort of the structural reasons why it's difficult for some of these businesses to get capital in the first place. I think an immediate thing that some people might think is, are these bottom of the barrel businesses who can't get money anywhere else, so they're coming to crypto or whatever. And that's just really not the case. We did dozens of interviews with a lot of these potential lending businesses early on, right? Before we started Goldfinch, and we just heard the same story over and over again that, even though they have profitable businesses, they're spending half of their time looking for capital. And it's just it's a huge pain point for them, which is why they're willing to use something weird like crypto. But a lot of that pain comes from the fact that they're kind of existing in this gap of financing, right? So the people who come on Goldfinch, they want to borrow between, say $1 and $10 million or so. maybe one, 20 million is the largest loan we've ever done. And if you want to get less than $1 million, they can often borrow that or find that within their local capital markets. And if you want to get more than 20-ish million, then you can start getting the attention of larger Western institutions who want to write checks at that size. But there is this gap in the middle that's just really not well served. And the fact that also a lot of these emerging markets have fairly high yield government bonds tends to suck out a lot of the capital and crowd out the investment that might otherwise exist in the private sectors of these countries. And so what's happening here, crypto is this very global phenomenon where the capital exists all over the world. And they're not scared of emerging markets as a rule, the way some Western institutions are. And it's very easy to get that capital around to any different country. And so they're able to help come in and fill this gap of finance, I'd say, again, between this kind of like $1 and $20 million zone. And then on the back of that, I think we get into some of these other advantages of using crypto that I was speaking about before, of liquidity, composability, accessibility. Like, we have over 2,000 different investors who are in our senior pool right now. And, it costs us nothing at a marginal cost to add another 2,000 investors, because crypto makes it so easy. People just put their capital in. And once the repayment comes in from the borrower, it can go out to infinite numbers of other investors. And there's no additional cost to us. And that's this kind of like accessibility piece. And then there's more liquidity. People can trade them around. And there's composability. We have other protocols also building on top of Goldfinch that adds more utility to the investor as well. So anyway, just wanted to add that kind of systemic color of why these businesses are coming to Goldfinch.
Yeah, it's amazing. It feels like there's just like a real moment of opportunity between the old financial system and the old way that these businesses would get credit and these new crypto rails. And, because these businesses don't have access to capital in the old system, you're basically, by injecting financial capital, you're giving them the ability to serve their communities and to grow and create impact in their local communities at scale that the old financial system wasn't doing. And so I think for that reason, it's kind of an example of crypto being good for the world, although it is wrapped in a very financial sort of container, which I think a lot of people, maybe suspicious of that, feeling a little bit like finance. And I wonder if you have anything to say to anyone who's suspicious of finance that's listening to the podcast. Like, what would you say to an audience member that has that kind of worldview?
Yeah, that's interesting. I totally understand. Let's see, what would I say? Like skepticism of like financial products and the financial industry generally to date. It tends to be, it has traditionally been kind of a whole system that has primarily served the wealthiest folks in the world.
Well, maybe I'll state the Steelman criticism, and then y'all can respond to it. Is that fair?
Yeah,
sure.
Cool. So this is not something I think, but I'm trying to build a composite of some of the critiques that I've heard. Banks are a vampire squid that is sucking the lifeblood out of our local communities. Wall Street is sucking blood out of Main Streets by basically sucking the returns out of businesses, and they're using it to justify or to pay for their large buildings on Wall Street in New York, major executive bonuses, and they're just trying to extract as much value as possible because of they're these intermediaries. And to me, like, as someone who likes crypto, I think the ability that these things can be made into protocols where there is no intermediary is the big opportunity of crypto. So I don't know, that's like the Steelman argument that I would sort of make for like a lefty regen crypto person who's suspicious of finance. So I don't know, I'd be curious how y'all would react to that.
Yeah. I think that, one, exactly as you say, crypto does allow for there to be fewer intermediaries, right? And already on Goldfinch, these deals happen between investors who are just individuals, people like you and me who want to get into these deals, and they're having direct relationships with these borrowers. And so they are the ones who are on the legal agreements, right? There's not some other entity in between. And so I think right there, you're already reducing some costs. I also think that the open nature of crypto and the fact that there is this composability between protocols and tokens can just create more competition. Right. And if you have more competition, there should be less ability for people to rent seek and sort of extract value out of the communities. And just broadly also say, what Goldfinch is doing, what a lot of crypto is doing it's not banks, right? It's not large institutions who are deciding what happens. It's these direct relationships of borrowers who can come on and say, hey, I'm looking for a loan, and people who can look at their information and documents and make their own decision about whether or not they want to provide capital to that loan. I would just say, broadly zooming out, finance can be done poorly. Finance is kind of like a tool, right? It can be done poorly where it harms people, but can also be done very well where it helps grow the pie for everyone. And I think the actual matter of execution, how much transparency is there into the processes and the terms and the repayment schedules, and how flexible can those be, and like who are you lending money out, and what is the money getting used for, what purposes? All those things really matter to me in terms of what the outcome is of finance broadly. Versus it just like always being a bad thing or always being a good thing. It's not. It's just it's just money, right? And money can be used for any purposes, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that I also believe that the concept of financial inclusion can often be a major sort of source of productivity and growth and prosperity in communities, and that like there's one viewpoint I guess you could take, which is that these financial institutions are bad and we need to stop them or something like that. But I think that it's more about enabling more folks in the world to have access to those kinds of benefits. They don't just go to the large buildings in New York that you described, but like anywhere else that can benefit from that access to financial systems. And that's where I see crypto really changing things, both like removing the gatekeepers, making it open, and at the same time removing the frictions so that the systems can be just more effective even in these communities that have been like traditionally overlooked by these larger institutions.
Right. Yeah, thanks. I think that's a pretty fair take. I'm wondering if you could extend out the traction that you've had so far, like in a world in which Goldfinch is maximally successful in 10 to 15 years, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the real goal we're trying to do is bring all of these kinds of private deal opportunities on chain and enable us to connect the world's capital with growth anywhere in the world. And so what that means in like 10 to 15 years is that any kind of a company or person that has earning potential that is looking to get financing on that earning potential has the ability to come to this open system on Goldfinch and access that financing. And I think of a comparison to where like public companies today, because they have all of this information that is trusted and it really reduces the frictions of due diligence, they can raise capital, like debt capital, more quickly because it's reducing the frictions around doing due diligence. And in a system on crypto in Goldfinch, where it's doing that not just for really big companies, but for all kinds of businesses, private or public, and even individuals, being able to come to the system and be able to access capital and fund essentially that future growth. That's really where we see this heading, and basically moving all of this kind of like private deals and private activity on chain and not enabling anyone with earning potential to access funding.
Mike, Blake, one of the things that I really like about Goldfinch and what it's doing is how it increases the legitimacy of crypto. So I remember during DeFi summer, vegetable farming and these kind of crazy games where there was all this yield available, and it turned out to not really be a sustainable thing. I'm remembering Yam Finance and all the vegetable forks that kind of came out of forking that, and there were really amazing yields on there, but they weren't really backed by anything. And in what I'm seeing in 2023 is actually the production of real yields being available on the Ethereum ecosystem, and I think part of that is like I've been running a staker. You can actually, if you're watching the video, you can see it behind me. I'm live validating blocks and earning a return by doing that. And I also like when I look at the Goldfinch website. One of the things I think is really cool is that the yields that are offered on Goldfinch, which are currently advertised as 7.8% USDC APY, are backed by real world businesses. So it's a stepwise increase in legitimacy for Web3 from being in this just self-referential vegetable farm like loop to actually having yields that are backed by real assets. And so I don't know, this isn't really a question, but I don't know. It's just a commentary that this is increasing the legitimacy of crypto, I think, to have products like like Goldfinch out there that are actually producing real yields for people who are investing, but then also using crypto capital in order to invest in these communities that don't have capital in the old financial system. So any comments on that would be welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see more and more of that, partially just almost because what you described is like the other ways of doing it aren't sustainable. So those won't continue, and we'll be left with only actual sustainable ways of doing it. And this approach that we took with Goldfinch from the beginning, which is really focused on like real world productive uses, sustainable forms of yield, was two-part. One is it's just part of our mission. It's part of why we wanted to start Goldfinch in the first place, which is trying to have this real impact in the world. And that was something we even talked about like during DeFi summer and seeing all these like market makers and crypto traders looking for capital. Like we talked to them, but just felt like they weren't quite a fit with this really long-term mission that we're after. And also believe that like, they can like use the capital in that moment, but it's not going to be very sustainable when, over the long term. And so they won't be the best kind of like borrower to go to anyway. And so it was this, we thought about it two parts, just like very aligned with the mission, and then also believed, when a bear market hits, then like these sort of unsustainable forms of yield aren't going to be able to continue in that environment. Whereas like there will always be productive uses around the world, like real borrowers doing real things on the ground that need capital. And we saw that basically in action with Goldfinch, where if you compare the yields that you can get with USDC on Goldfinch today to what was possible a year ago, it's the same, because it's the same borrowers, the same productive uses. It's these like really sustainable forms, like motorcycle taxi rides in Kenya haven't been affected by the crypto markets kind of changing a lot over the past year. And so it's both kind of like the strategic part, but also just really aligned with our mission.
I would just add one other thing, that I think this trend in getting more real world activity into crypto is also going to have this other effect of just making the space less volatile. Like right now, since everything is so self-referential and it's all about crypto, we see these just incredibly drastic swings up of, 10x up and then like 90% down within the span of, a year or 2 years. And that's just crazy. Like that can't keep going. People aren't going to want to, put all of their life savings into a system that does that. And so we need to have something that's more stable. And you get that through diversification. And, when the world's economy goes up and down, it goes up and down by like single digit percentage points, or less, right? And I think that's the kind of stability that crypto is going to need if it's going to start to actually go mainstream and have everybody trust it in a way that they want to put their own life savings on there and use it for everyday transactions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the question of like, do I trust this is really an interesting question, especially since, Satoshi in the Bitcoin white paper talks a lot about trustless systems. And I think that like the chain of trust, the epistemological chain of trust in the old financial system is I trust this institution, I trust these human actors. And the chain of trust in the Web3 ecosystem is just like the consensus risk and the protocol risk and the smart contract risk. And in a way, it's sort of comparing a 100-year financial system that's evolved a lot more, I think, evolved trust in a different way to a novel financial system that's only 10 years old, that's still evolving trust. And I definitely think that like a priori, the epistemological basis of trust in crypto is a more solid foundation for finance than it is in the old world, which is kind of based on these social institutions. And you can also kind of give more yields peer-to-peer because there's not going to be that Wall Street intermediary in between the capital provider and the capital receiver. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's, for the mainstream person, they may not understand exactly what's underlying all the blockchain technology and like why it can be so robust and resilient to changes and everything. But I think they're going to just see the high level of like, this thing continues to exist. It continues to work year in and year out. And like, they're eventually going to build up that trust that they can, I can use this for transactions, and more of their friends will start using it for transactions and whatnot. And so I think that's where crypto is going to be able to start getting more people involved. I also think it's interesting. I think crypto can add it is trustless in its own way, but can also allow for more of like a marketplace of trust. Like right now, you kind of have to trust a particular institution, and you have to trust, the U.S. government with the banks that they have and their chain of regulation down. But I think, in the true sort of crypto ideal world, there can be different people can almost create their own systems of regulation and trust on chain in a way where I can choose to buy into this human actors and their regulation and trust, or I could choose to buy into this one and put my money there. I kind of feel like that's a place where crypto can go. And one of the things that it really opens up is it allows for there to just be more options and not like let there be a monopoly on the state regulation of how and who you can trust.
Right. So more competition is better on both sides of the market.
Yeah, because I think fundamentally with finance, you're never going to get away from some sort of human judgment needing to take place. And people do want to often delegate a lot of that responsibility of choosing where to put their money to another human, right? Like people don't have the time and energy and effort, everyone doesn't, to be able to decide what's a good investment and a bad investment. I think you're still going to have some of these delegates and intermediaries just like naturally pop up as places to collect capital. And the way that they're going to prove out their trust is through their actions and through whatever code they choose to decide how they allocate. They can let the code restrict them to certain investments or not certain investments. I just think you have just more options and more competition that's going to be possible through what crypto is enabling.
Well, thanks so much for joining the GreenPilled podcast. I've really been thankful for your support of the podcast and the movement in the past. I'm wondering if you're in the audience and you're listening to this, how can people get involved in Goldfinch? How can they find y'all online and get involved in these markets?
I think the best starting point is the website, goldfinch.finance. And then also, and I encourage people to join the Discord, which is linked through the website. And then also the Twitter account for Goldfinch is goldfinch_fi.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining the Green Pill podcast. I think there's a fun little symmetry between a green pill and a goldfinch, both having colors in the name and both being part of this regenerative crypto movement has been a lot of fun. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the internet.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's great to be here.